interested in this next question is, starting with you, Shaz, if you could say, what specific aspect of your work brings you most joy?
Ooh, that's hard. Many aspects. I think probably the most joyful is working with students, kind of seeing the younger minds piece together, take the tools that you give them and create something new and different and extraordinary beyond what you could ever expect is really awesome. Just to enable people to do the things that they're hoping to do has been the best part. So when I was doing research, mentoring undergrads, mentoring high school students, it was awesome to see them come up with new ways to solve problems that I, had my own tried and true way, and they were like, you could do this in like 3 clicks, and and they just learned it yesterday. So things like that are really where, it's really where most of my joy comes in.
Thank you. Anybody else want to tackle that question? I know you all have moments of joy in your work. Korin, you're laughing. I'm gonna ask you to answer that question.
Yeah. So I really just like working with frogs. Like, I think that's just fantastic, being able to see them. And so it was more of a weird moment than just a moment of joy, but I like thinking about it. So in order to do the work that I do, I require frogs that are currently copulating. So they are intact, they're doing the act, and then I put them in these buckets, and then hopefully they lay eggs for me. So I'm out with 2 other people collecting frogs, and we find this like toad that's also breeding like fairly early. I'm like, oh, this is really cool. So I just want to see the toad because I like it. They're just American toads, they're everywhere, but I'm still very excited to see this toad. And so I go to grab it, and this toad is a male toad, and it is now confused by me. So I go to grab it, and the frog like kind of looks at me, and I'm like, well, this is really weird that it's just letting me pick it up so calmly. Didn't try to jump, didn't try to get away, anything like that. And then I noticed that his little arms and legs are now wrapped around my hand, squeezing me very, very tightly, which is, again, frog copulation. So he seems to have mistaken me for a female frog and assumed that we were now going to become an item, which was not the case. But thinking about that, it just amuses me. So I suppose that brings me a bit of joy.
And that will be an image that all of us have now. We can't get that out of our minds. Thanks, Korin. Anybody else want to answer the question about something that brings them joy?
So I'm a little unique in the sense of there are different scales of what there is to the work I do. So when you say what aspect of your work brings you most joy, I do teaching, I do research, I do administration. On that one, nobody should tell my head of department, but I love the research more than the administration. The teaching, it's amazing to be able to teach with the research that you do to bring science to life. So my teaching and my research are really tightly linked. Now, on the fish I study and the science I do, I'm most happy when I predict what a fish would do and it actually does it. Science is all about discovery, it's about hypothesizing. I look at a fish and I say, this fish tomorrow is going to put a nest over here. And I go there the following morning and there is a nest right there. I am very happy because I have read the mind of a fish.
A fish mind reader. That's great. That will be another image that I will keep in my mind. Great. Well, thank you for answering that question. I'm going to ask now to move on to the next question is, what are some of the biggest challenges of your work? Does anybody feel like tackling that question? Great.
So the biggest challenge, so coming from undergraduate program straight into the program I'm in now, the biggest challenge was just figuring out what research is or was, and figuring out not only that, but how to do something that you find interesting that'll keep you interested in this prolonged, long process of a PhD program, and just be able to stay focused on that one thing or two things, whatever you're doing for that amount of time. And I had the most trouble was just figuring out, what are the steps that need to be taken to, achieve my end goal of graduating. And yeah, so the biggest challenge was just getting over that hurdle, which is very tied in with kind of self-doubt and just doubting your own abilities. But just really trying to get over that, get past that, and really see that you're getting advice from so many people. They're giving you the path. You just need to kind of heed that advice and kind of take it in stride, and then build your program, start looking at your question, and then figuring out in the end that research is all about asking a bunch of questions, and actively pursuing the answer to that question based on these these methods that you and your people that you're working with have come up with. So just getting over these hurdles of doubting myself, and going after the many questions that I have.
Daniel, can I follow up on that question? On that answer? And it kind of leads me to the next question that I have. And where and when have your aspirations been supported in really great ways? And by whom?
So I'll say the first and foremost support always came from my mom. So before she passed in 2017, she was always supportive of what I wanted to do. Even when I came back to her in undergrad and said, "Hey, Mom, soil science, like I want to do that," and she was like, "What is that?" But she never told me not to do something. It was just she always wanted to know what it was and supported me in doing whatever it was I found interesting. So she always had kind of was that backbone that kept pushing me to go into civil and environmental engineering, to go to college in the first place, and then to come out here for the PhD program. I know she was excited when I got in and came out here. So she was the first and foremost inspiration or support system for me coming to where I am.
Great, thanks so much. Any of the rest of you want to take the question of challenges and support? Amber.
Well, yeah, like Daniel was saying, my family has always been supportive, despite not doing science themselves or necessarily being familiar with what it is I wanted to do. But more recently, I actually got connected with a lot of incredible Black scientists via Twitter. I actually messaged Jason Ward, who is a Black birder. He hosts Birds of North America, which is awesome, and started Black AF in STEM. And so I got added to this group chat of about 100 Black scientists, naturalists, and environmental educators. And that has been so incredible for me. Prior to this, I didn't know there were so many other people like me doing science out there. And just to be in this group of people who are unapologetically Black and doing science. And so I definitely felt very validated to be in a group of people who understood my experiences, have shared similar experiences, and were there to support me and have given so much to the field and to help other people have access to the field. And then for Black Birders Week, just the amount of support that received, and yeah, so that's time where I've felt very uplifted.
Can you talk a little bit about some of the specific experiences you had in during Black Birders Week and afterwards?
Sure. So for those of you that don't know, Black Birders Week started in response to a racist incident that occurred in Central Park with a Black birder, Christian Cooper, and a white woman called the police on him, saying that he was threatening her life, when that was not the case at all. He was just asking her to follow the rules of the area by putting her dog on a leash. So that video went viral, and the group of people got together and said, we need to do something about this. And I came in a bit later and hopped on board to help organize. And so, yeah, it was just a great experience. I had many people messaging me, even friends I knew for many years, saying that they learned so much and they didn't realize that these were things that Black people were experiencing, and that Black people felt unsafe or unwelcome in outdoor spaces. And yeah, while it was really uplifting, it's also a lot of the time the burden to fix these issues most often falls on Black people and other people of color. So sometimes that can get kind of exhausting for people who have been fighting for these things for many, many years. But overall, it was super positive and a lot of great things had come out of it.
Thank you so much, Amber. I'm going to open the next question, taking off of Amber's last answer. What would you tell yourself, your younger self, about how to face the challenges that you have encountered as Black scientists or educators? You all have superpowers, I think. Love to hear some of those superpowers named.
I'll hop in.
Great, sure.
Yeah, let's see. So I feel, gosh, maybe I hopped in a little too soon.
I can rescue you for now if you want.
Okay.
So I would say persevere. I almost wanted to jump in whilst Amber was speaking to share my experience of having to deal with private landowners in my line of research. If you are a field biologist and you study creeks, you are going to have to step on people's private property. And I think I've learned that in a much more vivid way in Southwestern Virginia, having had to, almost for everything I do, approach landowners, ask for permission to walk in the creek. Even if the creek is not private, the land that is adjacent to the creek may be private. And it's a two-layered problem, because there are people who don't trust the government and just Virginia Tech is government to them. And once you park vehicles with state license plate or something, they want you out of there. But then if you overcome that layer of resistance, somebody like me, for most people, it's the first time a Black person has come to their backyard. And to get them to be comfortable with you and trust that you are there to do good can be another big challenge. So a lot of perseverance is necessary. But along the same lines, I have made some incredible friendships with people who, once they hear my story and they understand where I'm coming from and what I do, they want me there. They want more of me there. And I think it's always a good thing to focus on that outcome, that, we can sometimes get people to understand us and accommodate us. And so it didn't force me to change my field of interest or study. I've had to narrow my areas of inquiry sometimes specifically to avoid certain things and certain people, which I think is not something every scientist necessarily has to worry about. But where I've settled, I think I've found a lot of reward in perseverance.
Thank you. That's inspiring. Anybody else want to take any of those questions?
So I'm ready now. So I think I would say two things, and one is this is pointedly dealing with racial and gender issues that they might encounter, that I wouldn't encounter. So first, it's academia is no different from the rest of the world. I had gone into grad school and higher education with this idea that here are the world's greatest thinkers. They are people who are practiced at putting their minds to their favorite problems, to any problem. So social problems are going to be among that and met with the same rigor that they add to their research. I really had that belief. And I kind of just forgot that scientists are human and are going to be subject to all of the human vices, like the tendencies that you learn in your society. And so it's no different. You might have a different way of talking about things. You might have a different conversation, but the issues that exist outside of academia are very much present inside of academia, and don't expect a vacation from the challenges in academia. So that's one thing. And then the other, kind of to adjust for that, is ask the hard questions early. I've gotten, I think one of the things that have helped my career path just become more and more and more supportive and more agreeable has been, I've started to ask people, what are your strategies for inclusion? How are you actively anti-racist during interviews? And then I kind of gauge, okay, do you have the kind of human, well, hold on, let me think about this. I haven't thought about this. I'm going to be transparent and honest with you. Or do you get really tense and go, I think, because that more than the answer is what you look for, right? Like, is this something, is asking the hard questions met with a lot of fear and tension, or is it met with, yes, other human, you're asking this because you are also human. Let me have a moment to figure it out and work with you. And doing that early on solves a lot of problems. Prevents a lot of problems. Yeah.
It's such so insightful and such a useful piece of advice, I think, in any situation. But yeah. Anybody else want to jump in on those? Yeah, Korin.
Off of what Shaz just said, because like scientists are just people. So in my particular area of research, I study something called priority effects. So the way the priority effects work is if you're looking at how a community of whatever assembles itself, then if you have something that assembles first, like it's the first thing to colonize that, then it can have lasting effects for the community. So if species A shows up first, then you might have a different community at the end than if species B or C were to show up first. And this is something that's been it's been established in community ecology since at least the 70s. It's been referred to before that, and there have probably been other studies that have hinted at it without calling it these things specifically. But scientists are, again, just human, right? And so despite acknowledging that this exists within ecological communities, there's not really an acknowledgement that this exists within human communities. Because of course it's populations, I am an ecologist, I know. But it doesn't exist within human communities, right? So looking at who has been the priority force in science and who wasn't allowed to be in science has likely led to lasting effects. And yet when you bring this up, it's often like, well, that's not a problem here, we don't do that. Even though it's clearly a thing.
That's a great perspective. So Korin, slightly on that topic, and this is an audience question. You do field work, and I'm wondering what you would do or what you would say to Black students who need to feel safe and welcome in the field, at field stations, and on field teams.
Oh, so I don't really have a happy answer for this
It
because
doesn't have to be a happy answer. This is not always a happy topic.
the study system that I work on are spring peepers. So they're frogs and they breed at night. I work at a research farm. So it's, you know, mostly safe. There's Virginia Tech workers that are there. They know that I'm going out. All the paperwork's been done, so that's fine, right? I would be pretty stressed if I was just going out into, you know, nature to do this field work. Like, it would feel completely unsafe to me as like a Black man walking around at night. Like, and I mean just walking around at night. We're not even talking about field work at the moment. Just, I'm here, I'm me, it's nighttime and I'm walking outside. There's always this like air of uncomfortability because of how dangerous you appear to people sometimes. So when you take that and you move it from just walking around at night to walking around in the woods at night, that's just something that I wouldn't be doing if I didn't have this like research farm to work on. So I don't know. I don't really have anything. Do international work, I guess. I'd feel fine, I guess, in like Costa Rica or, you know, Panama perhaps, but not here, not really.
It really is a new perspective for me, and I appreciate you bringing that up, both you and Emmanuel bringing that up, going on to people's property and out in the world where people see you only from one perspective. Any other answers to that question? Emmanuel?
Well, Patty, it's not just people's property. You know, I walk in this park a lot, Deerfield Park, right here, and it's public park, and everybody walks up and down and bird watch and, you know, do things without a second thought. I have been confronted by people that says, "Hey, this is private property," and so it is difficult to be a field biologist and to have that level of suspicion wherever you find yourself. And sometimes the little spot that you are not allowed to go, that is maybe where the amazing answer to your question is. But just the resistance of people to you moving, and you have to avoid spaces, becomes a real impediment to the progress of your discovery as a scientist.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing those vulnerable answers. So I'd like to ask anybody who wants to answer it of you five. Based on your experiences, what do you feel like are the most urgent changes that can be made in practices or policies or structures to improve the experiences of underrepresented folks in the sciences in particular?
I can
Daniel.
speak to just things based off things I've heard before, whether at Maryland or Tech. It's just one, if your department or university is talking about diversity and inclusion, first, I mean, have a set definition on what that means to your department or your school. Don't just say, yeah, we're about diversity and inclusion. What does that mean? What would that look like for your program in so many years? And then actively achieving that goal. So instead of waiting for people like to learn more about your school or your department and kind of fill in those spots, actively reach out and say, hey, we have these positions opening, whether it be professors, postdocs, PhD, masters, anything of the sort, or even just undergrads in general. We have these spots opening, actively recruit people from diverse backgrounds. And I mean, there are so many like large conferences for very diverse crowds. So actively recruit the talent that you're looking for from these programs, from these conferences, instead of just saying, we believe in diversity and inclusion and not doing anything to actually achieve that. And secondly, this is kind of a two-part thing, but to get rid of the sense that one, diversity and excellence in the field are mutually exclusive. I've heard a few times before that either one, we've tried the diversity hire before and it didn't work out. So saying they hired a minority or some type of person that didn't fit like the look of the department itself, and they ended up not working out for whatever reason. Maybe not a good fit. Maybe once someone did something bad on the one end, don't know. But they ended up not working out and saying, we already tried the diversity hire, saying that everyone that looks like that person that didn't work out will also not work out. And that's removing a sense of individuality between, you know, Black people, Native American people, just all these people saying we're lumped into this one sense. If one of us doesn't work out, none of us will work out. And also it moves away from, it has that mentality that if you're increasing diversity, you're also decreasing the academic excellence of your department, which just isn't true. So kind of getting rid of that sense of that they are exclusive from each other, and, you know, reading up on what you can actually do to get both of them and make your department not only more well-known and more productive, but also just more inclusive to a variety of people within your college community.
It seems to me that diversity leads to excellence. You know, diverse opinions, diverse points of view, diverse cultural backgrounds is actually better science. Of course, I'm an actor. Yeah.
Can I jump off on that?
Please.
Because I think that that's like such a crucial thing to think about recruiting. But you also have to think about where you're recruiting them to. And I often hear this analogy of like diversity and inclusion efforts are kind of like inviting vegans to dinner, but then you have no vegan food. And so there kind of has to be this internal work that has to happen first. And at the center of that is teaching the history. So I teach an intro to programming course. And one of the things that I teach is how computer science was a woman-dominated field. For decades. Right? The first satellite that went into space, code written by a woman. The first algorithm ever written was written by a woman, and it didn't really shift until the 70s. But you would never even know that, and you're talking now about modern day things like Gamergate and things about like sexual discrimination in the gaming industry. But the history, if we taught the history, that's a whole different problem. And then when we talk about things like, or when we mention things like, it's hard to get academics to realize there's a problem in the first place. It's because the history, the social and racial and gender issues that are tied up in the history of science aren't taught, they aren't included. And I think one of the most immediate things that has to be done is start the conversation and teach the racial history of your field.
Great, thank you. We are about 5 minutes from concluding this time together. And I want to finish with a question that I stole from Dr. Z's Twitter feed. And the question is, when you think of an equitable future in STEM fields, what do you see?
So there's this feeling that I get whenever I go into basically any place of higher education, where it's like, okay, where is the person that looks like me? And you search and you search, and then eventually, you know, you may run into that person or you may not. Maybe they don't exist. And so like for me, an equitable future isn't necessarily just, and this whole school was Black. Like that's not really what I'm going after. But I just want to get to that point of comfort where you feel, or you don't rather, feel the need to look for Black people. They should just exist in a space that shouldn't be something that comes up in your mind. They should just exist with other people. It should just be people instead of that constant urge to try and find somebody that looks like you.
Emmanuel, you have a thought about that? What you see?
That's very much it. I feel lonely sometimes, and I think my work would be a little more fun if I had a little more of my kind around here doing biology. Okay, doing biology. There are scientists, Black scientists in engineering and other science fields at Virginia Tech. But I'm sometimes quite lonely, and I think somebody had to take a chance on me to actually find out that they could get success with somebody like me in fish and wildlife. And departments, programs should take a little more risk. I also want to shout out to my friend Paul Angermeyer, who brought me here as a postdoc. And here I am after 15 years. So take a little more risk and take some chance and make the environment a little more equitable.
Any other visions of the future? Amber.
Yeah, so it's hard because the systems that are in place have been built upon racism. The scientists that have contributed to the field in the past may have been racist. For me, in bird research, there are many birds named after racist people. So I think we really need to look and dismantle these. And I feel like a lot of people may be well-intentioned, but I feel like if people aren't working to dismantle the systemic racism, then that's a part of the problem. So I think people need to realize that it's very deeply ingrained. And also to add, I feel like it seems so simple, but just listen to Black scientists. You know, I feel like oftentimes the things we say get dismissed as political when we're literally just talking about our lives. There's multiple identities. We're scientists, I'm Black, I'm also a woman, and these things I cannot separate. So being Black is very much tied to our scientist identity, and I think that needs to be acknowledged.
Well, we're nearly at the end. I'd love for any of you that have remaining thoughts that you want to share those thoughts. But I also don't want to push. Well, I'm going to say Korin, were you coming in there? All right.
Priority effects can be disrupted by community disturbance. So even if a historical contingency has led to the status quo as we know it, through disturbance, this can be changed. And in the same way, like just because something was racist or we had these principles there, doesn't mean it has to stay that way. It's easy to disrupt and disturb that thing and to bring about a new community that we're a part of. So, you know, I mean, ecology has shown it with other communities. And again, humans, it's a population, not a community, aware of that. But we can still take some of these principles and apply it to what we're dealing with here.
Great. So what I hear from that is that we have a challenge that the 107 of us who are still on this call have to create disturbance enough to change the future. And I want to finish by thanking you all so much for sharing this sometimes challenging and sometimes beautiful conversation. And I would like it if everybody now could turn on your videos. So we asked you to stop your videos at the beginning. Now we'd like you to turn them on. And and see all these folks that are on this call. And we're going to give a big Zoom round of applause to our panelists for sharing their time, their courage, their heart, and their heads. Thank you all for being here, and we'll say goodnight.